This video is an example of an upper body strength warm-up if you have Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility. The three main goals of our strength warm-ups should be to increase the stability around our joints, to prime or activate the muscles that we are going to be using in that session, and to practice and prepare for the movement patterns that we're about to perform. The warm-up I'm going to show you in this video is addressing the first 2 points. So what you do is you would do these activation exercises and then move on to warming up with your specific upper body movements that you're doing for the day to cover that third base of prepping and priming your body for the movement it's about to do. And yes, I've included POTS friendly and neck friendly variations in here for you as well. This warm-up sequence is something that we cover in my course Bendy And Strong, which is a 14-week course teaching you the fundamentals of strength training for hypermobile and Ehlers-Danlos bodies. Strength training warm-ups is something we cover in depth in that course, and what you're seeing now is just one of the additional resources that I've provided for the students of the course. At this stage, I'm planning on running a new cohort of the course every couple of months, so if you're interested, put your name in the waitlist. I'll link it in the description below. And of course, before you try any kind of exercise, make sure you're consulting with a good doctor and a good physio to make sure that it's right for you. Before we get started, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the main upper body joint that we're looking at, which is our shoulder joint, and the exercises that I've included, just to give you a bit of an understanding of why I've included them. So let's think about the shoulder joint. The shoulder joint is a ball and socket joint. Unlike our hip joint, which is also a ball and socket joint, the shoulder joint is very shallow. This means we have great mobility. We have awesome range with our shoulder joint, but it can come at the cost of stability. The shoulder joint is more prone to dislocations than the hip joint, and with Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobile populations, we can be at increased risk of this because of the extra laxity in our connective tissue. This means that we have to be proactively adding in extra stability to that joint, and if you have hypermobility or Ehlers-Danlos and you have problems with your upper body training sessions causing pain, clicking, or even dislocations or subluxations, this is probably a sign that there's a lack of stability there somewhere. So adding in a stability-focused warm-up can be one of the great ways to get you back into training safely and pain-free. So coming back to the shoulder joint now, we have the ball and socket joint, and from this joint we can perform internal rotation or external rotation. And these muscles that contribute to rotation at the shoulder joint also contribute to holding that joint in its correct position. So this warm-up is going to stimulate or activate some of our rotational muscles around the shoulder. Now, the second really important area that we're going to warm up is the muscles around the shoulder blade. Why is this? Well, the shoulder joint, as we've said, is a ball and socket joint. So we've got the ball, which is part of our humerus or our upper arm bone, and then we've got the socket. And the socket, the bone that forms that socket, is actually part of the shoulder blade. And the shoulder blade is a bone that has a lot of movement in it. So we need to make sure that we're paying enough attention to the muscles around that bone to make sure that the movement is functional, we don't have unwanted instability. Because if we have instability around the shoulder blade, this is likely going to travel to the shoulder joint, causing instability at the shoulder joint. This is why the treatment for a lot of rotator cuff injuries is actually to work the muscles around the shoulder blade and stabilize that bone. So let's go through some of the warm-ups we're going to include in this video. The first thing that we've got is the lock big three. We've got a lying version and a standing version. This one is going to be working the muscles around the shoulder blade to strengthen those. And with the lock big three, there are 3 different positions that we're going to do. With the second 2, doing shoulder extension from an internally and externally rotated shoulder position to help strengthen these muscles. So with the lock big three, we're going to be lying face down. Now this one doesn't really have many cues. You don't have to think about a lot of things, just the ones that I'm going to tell you. So don't overcomplicate this one. So we're going to be lying face down. If you can, we want to make sure that the head is facing forward, so we're not lying with it turned to the side, just because we want things to be nice and balanced. Hands out at 90 degrees. We're going to lift them up and down. And that is the first position in this sequence. So notice that I'm not lifting up crazy high, just up to about the height of my body and then back down. So that is the first one. Now we want to bring the hands down by our sides, palms facing down. This puts our shoulders in an externally rotated position. What we want to do here is lift the hands up, leading with the thumb, up and down. That is the second position. The third position of the lock big three is that we're going to turn the palms up. So this is now lifting from an internally rotated shoulder position. Again, leading with the thumb. And with this one, what we don't want to do is have the hands out too far. So we have them nice and close by our side. Now, if you want to challenge yourself with this one, we can add in weights. So with the weights, it's going to look pretty much exactly the same. So lifting up and down at 90 degrees. Let's say we'll do 10 reps of that. Then we bring the weights down by your side. And again, leading with the thumb. The temptation once we add weight in is going to be for you to lift with your pinky, but we want to lift with the thumb. So let's say we've done 10 of that, then we'll turn around and again, leading with the thumb for this one. So the only cue that I want you to think about with this is firstly, lead with the thumb. Secondly, don't come up too high. And the last thing is to imagine that the ground is made of eggshells. What does this do? It means that you don't just thump the weights down. So the ground is made of eggshells and we want to prevent ourselves from breaking those eggshells. If you get pain with this one, what we can try is squeezing under the arms as well. So switching on the lats, squeezing under your arms like you're trying to juice an orange in your armpit. That is not a cue that I would give to everyone. Just if you have pain with this exercise, you can try that out. If it relieves the pain, great. If it doesn't, then just avoid this exercise. We never want to be doing any of these exercises, even if they're really low load, if they're also causing pain. Okay, let's say for whatever reason you have problems with the big three. Maybe it's from lying face down, or maybe you just feel discomfort with this exercise. Here is an alternative that we can do, standing up. So let's call this one the big two for shoulders because there's just two positions that we do in this sequence. So with this one, I'm using the cable, but you can use a band just attached roughly to this height. And the height that we want to attach it to is so that when I'm standing with my elbow straight, with my hand by my side, it's roughly hand height. What we're going to do, facing the machine or facing the band attachment, elbow locked, and notice how my palms are facing forward. This is to mimic the palms down or the hands forward position that we did in the big three. So lock the elbow, and then what we're going to do is squeezing under the arm, just pull that back to your body line, leading with the thumb as before, and then back down. So squeezing under the arm, back to your body line, hold for 5 seconds, and then back. So this is position 1 as an alternative to the lock big three. And I'm just focusing on keeping my elbow straight and squeezing under my arm. Now, the other one is, you probably guessed, palms down or palms facing backwards. This is putting it in the internally rotated position for the shoulder. So here, squeezing under the arm, keeping the elbow straight, just back to my body line, hold for 5 seconds, and then return. So again, palms backwards, leading with the thumb, squeezing under my arm, just in line with my body so we're not pulling too far back behind. Hold for 5 seconds, keeping that elbow really straight, and relax. Now, range of motion is super important here. Firstly, I'm not pulling back to super far behind my body. The second thing is I'm not standing back here. So if I was standing back here, I already feel tension on this. What we want is the tension starts about here, and then the movement finishes here. The next exercise is the lock lat pull, which is going to target the lat muscles. So the lat muscles are a really underrated muscle for shoulder, spine, and even hip stability. This muscle covers a lot of different joints. It's a really big, strong muscle, and doing the lat activation is a really nice addition to your upper body warm-ups, but it can also help your midsection or lower body warm-ups as well. In particular, if you have issues with your shoulders shrugging up during training, or just in general, you get really tight up here from your shoulders shrugging up all the time, this exercise won't cure it in every case, but in a lot of cases, it's going to really help with that. What we're going to do here, I've got the band attached up high. If you're doing this one from home, you can get attachments that will allow you to do this with a closed door. So you just thread something through and then close the door, and then that's the band attachment. If it's not tall enough, you can just do it kneeling, which I'll show you in a sec. So for this one, what we want to do is put the elbow into the band and just notice that it's right on the elbow there. It's not further up the arm, it's right on the elbow. I'm also going to hold on to this, not because I'm going to be pulling from my arm, but just because I don't want the band to fly in my face. Stepping back, and then the goal of this one is to lead from the elbow. So I want you to imagine that you've got pockets down the side of your pants, not the front, not the back, but down the side of your pants. And what we're going to try and do is get the elbow as far down that side pocket as we can. So here, leading with the elbow, pulling down. Now, I want to just get it a little bit further, so I'm going to let my torso follow a little bit. So this is the exercise here, pulling down and down. And what I'm not doing here is like an active side bend. This is not a crunch for my abs. This is the fact that my elbow wants to get so far down that my torso just needs to follow a little bit to get it a little bit further down. So here, because remember, one of the actions of the lats is actually lateral trunk flexion. So lateral trunk flexion means bending the trunk to the side. With the lat muscles, I just said one of their actions is lateral trunk flexion. We also know that they internally rotate the arm. They help to adduct the arm, so bring the arm from the side down to its midline. Then we also have shoulder joint extension, which is, imagine you're doing freestyle. This is shoulder joint extension here. And we also know that they are a big muscle for depressing the shoulder, so pulling the shoulder down. That's why this is a really great exercise for people who get tightness through here or tend to have their shoulders shrugging up a lot. Now, if for whatever reason you get pain with this exercise or you've been doing it for a while and it starts to not feel quite as good anymore, what we can do is actually do more of a adduction movement rather than extension. So the one that I just showed you here, this is extension. This is moving from front to back, extension at the shoulder joint. But what we can do is make it more adduction. So that's moving from the side inwards. So how do we do this? We just twist our body around like this. So here, pulling down and squeezing. So you can play around with those and see what feels best. For most people, I would recommend the first one that I showed you, just pulling down like this. But if for whatever reason your body doesn't love that one, you can try this. Obviously, if either of these cause you pain, don't do them. Okay, lock, lat, pull, but now we're going to do it on a cable machine. So for this one, I've got this attachment here, which is just the rope handle attachment. And what we're going to do is just the same as if we're doing it with the band. The main difference is now with the band, we've got almost it cueing us to pull from our elbow. But with this, because we're holding onto it now, what we don't want to do is pull with our arms. This isn't a bicep curl. This is an exercise where we're pulling from our elbow, but our hand is just the attachment that we have to use. So standing here, holding onto it here, stepping back, elbow down to hip. So as if we're putting it into that pocket, we get that slight bend at the bottom. Now, you can see I've got it on the tallest attachment here, and I'm not a particularly tall person. So if you are anything taller than me, or if you've got a cable machine that's shorter than this, or let's say you're doing it from home with an exercise band and you don't have a super high attachment, what we can do is we can kneel. So we're going to come back to here, elbow into that side pocket, down, squeezing, and a slight bend at the bottom. And remember, with that bend that we're doing at the bottom, it's not an active ab kind of to the side. It's just the fact that our elbow is pulling so far down that the torso wants to follow. Now, the next thing that we're going to include is an external rotation exercise, and these we can do standing or lying down. For some of you, the external rotation exercises will be great. For others, they may not help so much. See how you go. If they're really helpful, include them. If they hurt or anything like that, don't do them. Remember, we talked about the shoulder needs a nice amount of balance around it. So if we've got really strong internal rotators, we need to balance that out with external rotation strength. And generally speaking, with EDS and hypermobility, unless you're actively working on your external rotators, it's probably more common that you're going to have an external rotator weakness rather than internal rotators. With that said, let's go through the lying down external rotator exercise. So for this one, this is a nice regressed version of a couple of other external rotator exercises. I like this one because it's a lot harder to do things wrong. So we've got the weight here. The 2 points that we really want to think about before we even start doing the movement is our shoulder blade and our elbow. So shoulder blade, this left shoulder blade here, I'm going to imagine I'm tucking it back and down into the opposite back pocket of my pants. This elbow, I'm going to glue it here to the front of the shoulder. And that's not going to move this whole time. The shoulder blade's going to stay locked in. The elbow's going to stay locked in. The next thing is we want the elbow to stay at 90 degrees. So grabbing the weight here and just lifting up and then back down. Up and back down. Now what you'll notice is I'm not coming all the way down to the ground, because did you see what happened with my elbow there when I did that? So let's go back down here and then all the way down to the ground. The elbow wants to lift up and or the shoulder blade will want to move. We want to really make sure that we're limiting this range of motion. Shoulder blade pulled back and down, elbow locked in by the side, and we're not going all the way up either to the point where we strain ourselves. We're just going up to a nice comfortable height and then back down. And that is the lying external rotation. I'll show you from the back. So you can see here that I'm really working on pulling that shoulder blade back and down. I'm not letting this happen. So lock it in, lock the elbow in place, and control that range of motion, keeping the elbow bent to 90 degrees. Okay, so let's say you're struggling with the lying shoulder rotation. We can do it with a cable attachment as well. At a push, we can do it with the band. I just don't like the band so much because the further we go with this one, the more stretch it's on the band, the harder it becomes. So I would prefer the cable because it's an even amount of resistance throughout. If you can, do it with the cable. At a push, you can do it with a band. But if it starts to hurt your shoulder, just be aware that might be why. So same cues with this one. We want to think about tucking this shoulder blade back and down into this opposite back pocket and gluing the elbow to the front of the hip. Then we're rotating out like this. Now, just take a notice. If I was to go here, that's going to want to pull my shoulder forwards and my elbow out of position. So we want to angle our body at just the right angle where it allows us to get the most amount of tension on the muscle without wanting it to pull us out of position. So that's it there. And on the other side, it's going to look like that there. And what we don't want to do again is this. So locking the elbow in place, shoulder blade pulled back and down, and that is the cable external rotation. Now I will say If you're at a gym that doesn't have a very well-oiled cable machine, this can feel a little bit rough on the shoulder. That can make a difference as well. And lastly, I've included some serratus anterior exercises. This muscle is an important muscle for shoulder blade stability, but it does also help to produce movement at the shoulder blade. So this is sometimes called the punching muscle because it helps with the movement of the shoulder blade that occurs when you're performing a punch or performing a really big hug and rounding your upper back, moving the shoulder blades like that. That is one of the important actions of the serratus anterior muscle.
Okay, before we do this exercise, it's editor Annie here, coming in just after getting some feedback from some of the people doing the course. I'm gonna list the serratus anterior exercise as being a little bit more advanced. And the reason is that if you don't have very good shoulder blade retraction, what is shoulder blade retraction? It's pulling the shoulder blades, squeezing them in together, which is basically the opposite movement of what the serratus anterior exercise is doing. So if you don't have very good shoulder blade retraction, you may find that this serratus anterior exercise is not very comfortable for you. It may cause pain. If that's the case, do not do it. So I thought about taking this one out altogether, but for some of you, the serratus anterior exercise is going to be amazing, especially if you have really good, really strong shoulder blade retraction. If you've been working on your shoulder blade retraction for a while, you've got it really nice, really evenly good on both sides, this exercise is going to be an awesome warm-up for you. If you're not so good at that, we want to focus instead on some shoulder blade retraction exercises. For example, the first exercise in the lock big three. So just thought I'd put that caveat in there. Do not do this one if you have really terrible shoulder blade retraction. It's probably not a good idea. If this one hurts you at all, do not do it. Do not continue with it. And it is a bit more of an advanced exercise. But I've left it in because for some of you, it's going to be really helpful.
I'm going to show you the regressed exercise first and then the more progressed or more difficult version. So starting on all fours, we're going to have our hands planted really nicely underneath our shoulders and our knees underneath our hips. So everything's nice and stacked. This one is a yoga move that we're going to steal called the cat camel. So for this one, we start off by squeezing the shoulder blades together. That's retraction of the shoulder blades. Now we're going to imagine that we're doing that big hug. So we're going to drive the palms of our hand into the floor and pull the shoulder blades out and around as if we're doing a big hug. Then back to this position here. So from here to here, and that is working our serratus anterior muscle. As we're pushing away, it's working the serratus anterior muscle. So that is the easy version. Now let's do the more challenging version. We're going to add in the bird dog. So opposite arm, opposite leg. Now imagine that we're doing the exact same thing, squeezing the shoulder blades together and then pushing away. Squeezing together and then pushing away. And this one is actually quite challenging. So don't be surprised if you can only get a few reps out, and we might make it our goal to hit, say, 5 reps, or make it a goal over the next coming weeks to work up to being able to do 5 reps. So squeezing together and then pushing away. Together and away. All right, if you have trouble with the cat, camel, bird, dog, or the serratus anterior exercises that we did on the floor, this is an alternative that you can do standing up. So this is going to be a little bit gentler on your neck. It also might feel just a little bit better. Sometimes that one might be better for you. Sometimes this one might be better for you. So for this one, I'm going to use a cable, but if you're training from home, you can use an exercise band as well. What we're going to do for this one is stand facing the machine, and I've got this roughly set to eye height. Hands here, palms facing down. And this is going to be similar to a straight arm lat pull down if you've done that one before, but we're going to do slightly differently. So holding it here, we're going to lean forwards from the hips. We're just going to pull it down to roughly here. So we're not going all the way down as you would with the straight arm lat pull down. It's just a shortened range of motion. And this is a bit of a weird cue, but when I do this, I kind of think of myself if I'm in a swimming pool and I'm pushing myself out of the swimming pool, but just with my elbows straight. Now, the last thing I've included is a thoracic extension exercise. This is not going to be working any muscles, and it's also not really what I would call a stretch per se. For anyone who knows my stance on stretching with Ehlers-Danlos, I'm not a big fan of static long hold stretches for people with EDS and hypermobility, and particularly as a strength warm-up. So this exercise that I've included, some of you might think, oh, why has she included a stretching exercise in here? This is more of a mobilization, a joint mobilization exercise. This is a dynamic moving exercise just to get rid of some of the stiffness that can occur in this thoracic spine region. Now, if you do this and it feels great, perfect. If you do it, it doesn't really help. It's not really something that's essential to include. But there are times in my training when this makes such a big difference, and I know for other people with hypermobility it can make a huge difference, so I've included in here as well, but just include it on a as I need it basis. So what we're going to do is hands crossing over, our shoulders like this. And I've set the bar up so that it's just underneath the bottom of my shoulder blade. So my shoulder blade is not touching it. It's just up against my spine at the bottom of the shoulder blade. I'm sitting up on the bench with my butt directly underneath my shoulders. And all I'm doing is lifting my elbows up to the ceiling. I'm not thinking about arching my back. I'm not thinking about anything else other than just allowing my elbows to reach up towards the ceiling. So this is the first thoracic mobility drill that we can do. And what we can do is another one that is rotational. So sitting in the same position, what we're going to do is just place our hand on the bar, then the other hand, then back to center. Place our hand on the bar, then the other hand on top. Back to center. Place our hand on the bar, other hand on top. Now, the reason that we're doing this in the bench press with the bar here is because it prevents us from getting this mobility from our lower back. So it puts us in a really nice position to get the extension and the rotation from our thoracic spine rather than our lumbar spine. Now, this is just a sample warm-up. What do I mean by this? Well, this is not going to work for every single hypermobile person all of the time. It's going to work for most of you, but if you find some of these exercises trigger you, cause you pain even in the area that's not supposed to be working, for example, if your neck gets set off when you're doing something that shouldn't involve the neck, then I don't want you to keep going with these exercises. We want to be only doing pain-free movements that help and contribute to our body feeling really good. For most of you, this warm-up will feel really good. It will really help and you'll notice a difference. But for some of you, it won't. And even for the people it does work for, there may come a time where it stops working and you need something a little bit more targeted for your body and your specific needs at that point. If that's the case, I encourage you to seek out a hypermobility specialist, physio or rehab specialist, and ask them for some strength and stabilizing exercises for your body that can help you prepare for your upper body. And one last thing that I'll say, with EDS and hypermobility, we tend to have these fluctuating imbalances. So you might find that you do these exercises for a while and it feels amazing. Then after 6 or 8 weeks or even a couple of months or years, suddenly they don't feel so good. This is not a sign that the exercises were bad or that there's something wrong with you. This is just the way things go with hypermobility. We get so good at doing these rehab exercises or doing these preventative exercises that sometimes it can form a new imbalance. And with EDS and hypermobility, we tend to have more extreme imbalances. So this new strength that we've created with the rehab exercises, after a while, can start to present as pain, which means that we need to go back to the drawing board and come up with some new exercises that don't hurt, that still add strength and stability to that area. Thank you so much everyone for joining me for this video. I want to just finish off by saying, remember, do not train through pain. None of these exercises should be painful, either in the area that we're trying to train or any other area of the body. If any of these trigger you, we don't want to do them. So if any of these are hurting, do not do them. That is all for now. Thank you so much for joining me. Drop any questions you've got in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.